welcome to Chautauqua People. Today we have a very special guest from the Chautauqua Institution. We have Mark Altschuler. Mark is a longtime special studies instructor and also is the commissioner of softball at Chautauqua. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Ira.
Just like Charlie Rose, eh?
It feels like that, absolutely.
Well, you've been teaching courses a long time at Chautauqua, and you're really well known on the grounds. How did you first find out about Chautauqua, and when did you first come to the institution?
Well, I came as a vacationer for a week in 1993. I had a relative named Edith Mendel from New Jersey who came all the time for a week, stayed at the Athenaeum, kept telling me I had to visit Chautauqua. Many years I paid no attention to her. Finally, I came in 93. She said I really had to come to meet my cousins, Rich and Lynn Moschel, who lived in Buffalo, summered in Chautauqua. Anyway, I finally did that in 93, and I can tell you why I loved the place.
Okay.
When I came as a vacationer, day 2, some folks invited me to play tennis with them. Day 3, they invited me to their house for dinner. I thought, what a great place to vacation.
This is just like normal, right? This is the normal at Chautauqua. People get invited all the time.
But I didn't know that until I showed up in 93.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And the Moschels are still here, and Lynn is still your cousin, right?
Lynn is my cousin. Rich is not a blood relative, but we call each other cousin.
Good guy.
We really don't hang out that much, but we feel like family. It's a kind of a nice feeling.
Sure, sure. What was your first job on the grounds? I know you've had a lot of different responsibilities. What was your first real job?
So that's a story. As people say, you ask me a question, I have a story. So in 1996, an acquaintance of mine named Terry Layton took the job as the copy editor on the Chautauquan Daily. A few days before the season opened, she called me up desperately and said, you have to come and be the sports reporter, because the sports reporter who was lined up got sick or something. Mm-hmm. My response was, I can't do it. I have no place to stay. I've got other plans. She was very persuasive. I came and did that job and had more fun than a human being should have. I did that job for 3 years, 96, 97, 98.
Being a sports reporter for the Daily. But
That's
the paper was different then than it is today, wasn't it?
Right. Now it's a year, the editor is a year-long member of the staff, and I would say it's more or less the house organ. When I was there, it was something that just sprung up for 9 weeks. The editor was a woman who had grown up at Chautauqua. She was so happy with the job I was doing, she said, don't come to any meetings, just give me an article a day. And so I kind of wrote sports, but I kind of turned it into human interest stories.
Like a feature writer for a real newspaper.
So I would go down to the lake and watch kids skip stones, and that was a story.
What was one of your favorite stories that you did? Because I know you wrote a lot of stories about sports.
I did. Well, I always loved covering the softball league because I love softball.
You may have to explain to people what the softball league is at Chautauqua.
Well, there's a men's slow pitch softball league. There's a women's slow pitch softball league. They've played baseball and or softball at Chautauqua since 1888. We just looked that up.
Okay.
On legendary Sharp Field. And I mean, it's a league that I don't know how long the softball league's been going on, but I think it's been slow pitch softball for about 50 years. Okay. I've been part of it for about 20. But I think maybe one of my favorite stories was the kids skipping stones on the lake. Because they were so creative. And then I would watch kids play games in Bester Plaza, and I'd see such creative. When I did stuff about children, I would love it. I also, back in those days, Sadie J's, people who were around back then would know that I interviewed people there, and I interviewed lots of interesting people.
We used to meet at that restaurant, right? It was a big meeting place.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it was my meeting place when I was a reporter, for sure.
Yeah, it's too bad about Sadie J's.
I miss it.
Yeah, I do too. So, where do you work when you're not at Chautauqua?
So I'm a professor of English at Bergen Community College in North Jersey. I've been there not quite as long as I've been at Chautauqua. I've been there about 18 years. Before that, I was teaching high school. And I live in North Jersey, but I'm a native of the Philadelphia area, so I never say that New Jersey is home. Actually, here's what I usually say. I spend 2.5 months at home in Chautauqua, and then 9.5 months as a visitor in North Jersey.
A lot of people consider Chautauqua their home.
I think so.
Yeah, that's okay. And I know you've been teaching at Bergen Community College for a long time, and you've been teaching at Chautauqua for a long time. Mm-hmm. There must be some differences between the two. Could you describe how it works at both places? I mean, how is it different?
Well, there's no question I love teaching. I became a full-time Chautauquan by accident. I became a teacher by accident, which is another story, but I think it's accidentally the right career for me. I love teaching. I love teaching at Bergen Community College, but it's not as much fun as teaching at Chautauqua.
Right.
First of all, I don't grade papers at Chautauqua.
Right.
Second of all, at Bergen Community College, I'm probably teaching people in their teens and 20s, nothing against them.
Right.
At Chautauqua, people like Ira Cooperman show up in my class, which he did in what year?
2003.
2003.
That's when
Ira
we
showed
first
up
met.
in my short story class. That's
Right.
when we first met.
Right.
And in fact, we read a Vietnam War story, and Ira had been in Vietnam, and he shared that. So what you get in Chautauqua is just an amazingly rich body of adult students who bring experience and intelligence into the classroom like no place else.
Yeah, a lot of experience, that's for sure. But you've also had veterans in your classes at Bergen Community College.
Absolutely.
I know you've mentioned to me you've had some diversity there, haven't you?
At the college?
At the college, yeah.
Incredible diversity. We have students from 140 countries at Bergen Community College. We have about 18,000 students on 3 campuses. It's a really thriving community college, and I love teaching there. I love my teaching very much. I would say I teach hungry immigrant kids. And I've learned a lot by the ethnic diversity I've been exposed to. When I get to Chautauqua, it's like, wow, where did all these white people come from? Because that's not Bergen Community College at all. And Ira, you're right, we have I don't know the number, but a significant amount of veterans there who, I teach, and I actually, when I teach Vietnam War story, or when I teach war stories,
Right.
I have used those veterans to help me lead discussion
Okay.
at Bergen. And actually, I do the same thing at Chautauqua. Paul Womack, who was, you have to help me out, Vietnam interrogator
Right.
when he was 19 or 20 years old, and later a chaplain. He's come in. He was actually in my class last week helping us lead discussion on a Vietnam War story.
He's great.
He's great.
Yeah, there are a lot of great people. What was your preparation for becoming a college professor? Where'd you go to college for your undergraduate and graduate work?
Well, I'm a kind of guy who, maybe if you're an emotional cripple, you just keep going back to graduate school, and I kept doing that. So Reading, Pennsylvania, a little school called Albright College, a Methodist school, is my undergraduate.
Right.
I have a master's degree in English from the University of Connecticut, a master's of teaching English from Brown University, and a PhD in American Studies from the University of New Mexico.
New Mexico?
Yeah.
What brought you all the way to New Mexico? I mean, you're an East Coast guy.
Yeah, that's true. And when I got there, I definitely felt like an East Coast guy lost, but I quickly fell in love with the place. They call it the land of enchantment. It truly is. Well, there aren't too many PhD programs in American Studies. That's what brought me there. And actually, the guy running it, Sam Gerges, was a guy from Brooklyn, and he kind of recruited me. So I went out there and had a great experience. My really good friend that I met at the University of New Mexico, Ed Mahoney, we haven't even seen for about 10 years, just visited me here at Chautauqua, which was pretty wonderful.
You do have a lot of visitors here, don't you? I notice in the building occasionally people who I don't recognize living there, but...
Well, I think I'm very popular when I live in places like Chautauqua. People want to visit me, but partially it's visiting me, but it's partially experiencing Chautauqua.
Sure. No,
they don't seem to want to come to North Jersey as much, you know.
You know, one of the things at Chautauqua that's really interesting is that a lot of people our age came here because of their parents. They brought them here. But you brought your parents here.
It's
you were
true.
here before your parents.
You know, actually, I said I came here for a week in '93. I came here for 2 weeks. I loved it so much that I did come back later in the summer with my parents. And then my parents came for a week every year, and now they're both deceased. My mother died a year ago, and my father 7 years ago. They love Chautauqua as well, but that is unusual right? That's the generations in reverse.
Right, right. But I know, having seen both your mother and father, they did love it here. And
they did.
Your father was as an intellectual, at least he thought of himself as being intellectual. And
he was a man with a lot she for sure.
He did, and your mother, you know, until very recently was here, and we enjoyed seeing her. She was usually here week 9, right? The end of the season?
In recent years, yeah, they started doing the week 9 Bellinger Hall thing.
Right.
And when my mother was younger, did she love playing tennis at Chautauqua? It was one of her great passions. She played until she was about 85.
Did you pick up your passion about playing tennis from your mother?
From both my parents.
Really?
I played with them as a kid. Yeah, sort of. But then I stopped playing for a while. And then I'd say I really got serious about tennis at Chautauqua.
Really?
Yeah, because the facility is so good and the teachers are so good.
What time of the day do you play tennis usually?
Mornings, most often.
How early in the mornings?
Well, I don't play with the Dawn Patrol. If there's a group that plays at 7,
yeah.
I'm willing to. And I do play that early sometimes, more likely 9 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I hear you going out really early.
I'm an early riser. I've been playing 9 holes of golf at like 7 in the morning recently.
Really? Even the other day when it rained, didn't you get rained on?
My friend Ed, we played through the rain and had a great time.
That's great. That's great. Well, you're passionate about most sports, I know. What's your favorite sport? Tennis, baseball, softball? What do you enjoy the most?
The sport I played the most as a kid was actually basketball. The sport that I'm the most passionate about as a fan is definitely baseball, which started at a very young age. And whether I like playing softball or tennis more, I don't know. I think if there's a ball to hit, I enjoy it.
Are you still a Phillies fan?
I'm still a Phillies fan, surrounded in North Jersey by Met and Yankee fans, and they're not fond of Philly fans.
That's all right.
I'm loyal to my hometown teams completely.
But you're more than just loyal to your hometown team. You also become a real expert on baseball. I know you spend a lot of time at the Baseball Hall of Fame.
I'm pretentious enough to call myself a baseball scholar. I have been going to the Baseball and American Culture Symposium in Cooperstown at the Hall of Fame and making presentations. And I've been teaching baseball classes, baseball and American culture classes at Chautauqua. Here's what I say about myself. I really only have 2 competencies in life: teaching literature, leading discussions in literature, and teaching baseball history, literature, and its cultural significance in the U.S. They're both very impractical skills, and both are valued at Chautauqua.
Right. Well, a lot of things are valued at Chautauqua that probably are not valued outside of our gated community.
It's one of the reasons I love the place.
Sure, sure. That's all right. So this season you're serving as the commissioner of softball, right?
Yeah, I've been doing that for a while.
What does that entail? I mean, being commissioner, I think of you as being Jamadi or somebody.
It is a great title, isn't it?
It is. It is a great title.
I say it's a big title for a guy who gets to make a schedule and make sure there's an ump at the games. And in recent years, actually, in the last 3 years, I was running the women's league and not the men's league. This year I ran the men's league. But it does entail more than that because, well, this is a little exaggeration, but only a little.
Okay.
I say the women's league, they're very good athletes. They play their game, they go home, and they had a good time. The men are sort of arguing calls from 1983, so running the men's league is harder.
Are the men more competitive than the women among each other? Or are they just live baseball.
There are more guys in the league who have been there for 30 years and 40 years, and they carry a lot of history, and they take it very seriously.
Right.
And they're very intensely competitive, and I kind of admire that. Sometimes it's a little over the top.
Right. And there are championship games, right? I mean, you actually have
championship games were last week.
Right.
Both the men and the women. The reason we end week 6 is there are kids in the league who live in the South and go back to school early. I mean, many places in the country they start early. We had one incredible men's playoff game where the lowest seeded team was playing the highest seeded team. The lowest seeded team was ahead 27-13 going into the last inning.
Wow.
They held on to win 27-26. And Skylar Zaru, who's a longtime Chautauquan and a wonderful kid, a 20-year-old college lacrosse player, saved the game on a Willie Mays catch in the outfield. One of the great games of all time in the Chautauqua Softball League history. It's a subculture of Chautauqua that lots of people don't know.
Right.
It's a beautiful culture where, what I say is at the softball games, I make friends with 12-year-olds and 80-year-olds, and they play with each other and against each other.
And it's a nice field. Sharp Field is a lovely field overlooking the lake, right? I mean, you can see the lake from there.
Absolutely. You couldn't get a more beautiful setting.
It is really lovely. So you've got all these interests. You teach literature, you teach short stories.
I do.
And you teach baseball, and you're very involved as commissioner of softball. We've got to get that title in there again. That's a great title, I agree. What about other interests that you have on the grounds at Chautauqua?
Well, what I say is because I value the Chautauqua community so much, I have a hard time saying no to people when they ask me to do things. So I can get pretty overloaded, which I'm not complaining, but for instance, I'm on the board of the Writer Center, and I helped organize a few weeks ago the Favorite Poem Project.
Right.
I organized the Friends of the Theater play discussions. I've now been invited next year to be on the Opera Guild.
Oh.
And I don't know much about opera, but...
They may ask you to be a super in the performances. You may have to dress up.
Well...
As a woman, that's this year, the Taming of the Shrew.
I think part of the Chautauqua experience is trying new things that are outside your comfort zone. So perhaps...
I agree. And you obviously enjoy doing things that you haven't done before, trying out new things. I think you told me that was among your favorite things at Chautauqua, right?
Well, I think what I said was very often, maybe if I have a favorite thing from the summer, it's something that surprised me. That is, going to a lecture where I hadn't heard of the lecturer and maybe the topic didn't sound interesting and it was fascinating, or something like along those lines, or going to a country western act on Friday night. I'm not a particular country western fan, and finding the singer to be very good.
Very interesting, yeah.
Those kinds of things happen quite often at Chautauqua.
And sometimes you run into interesting people that you don't expect are going to be interesting. What are some of the most interesting people that you've met at Chautauqua over the years, and why?
Ooh. I think I'll answer it in two ways.
Okay.
I mean, there are so many people who are interesting to me, who I consider my best friend, among my best friends, people I've met at Chautauqua, who the relationships feel very deep. But I think what comes to mind, the very first baseball and American culture class I taught at Chautauqua about 20 years ago, two guys in that class, Bob Sherman, who lives in the farmlands about 40 miles east of Cleveland, and Arnold Goldman from St. Louis. I call them both my uncles now. That I have such a deep relationship with two guys from my first class ever. Bob Sherman just turned 90. Arnold Goldman, I think, is 82 and has Parkinson's disease. But those relationships are so deep and so important to me.
Sure.
In fact, at the end of August, I'm going out to see Bob with a bunch of other Chautauqua guys. We're going to a Cleveland Indians game.
Oh, great.
But the other thing I was going to say is I lead these short story discussions. So my classes are not lecture classes.
Right.
We discuss. And I think what I discovered at Chautauqua is there's a kind of intimacy that comes out of that. I'm not even quite sure I can describe it. And maybe it's in part it's because at Chautauqua, you're discussing literature, you're having that common experience. I may not know what these people do for a living. I may not know if they're billionaires or paupers, but we have this common experience,
right.
And there's just, as Yogi Berra would say, deep depth to those relationships.
Right. I know we have at least one really good friend like that in common. It's Fred Wiseman, who we've learned a lot about jazz from, and also his 1948 World Series ring, and just all sorts of really interesting things. People do bring a lot of things with them to Chautauqua, don't they? They bring their experiences.
And so, did you interview Fred here?
No, I wish we had.
Fred is now 89 and not at Chautauqua.
Right.
But his son, Mark Weissman, is.
Right.
And Mark has, this summer I've become very close to Mark. I admire that guy a lot. What Ira didn't say is I met Fred through Greg Peterson,
right,
because Fred had a major league childhood. His father, Lefty Wiseman, was the trainer for the Cleveland Indians for about 28 years. I romanticized that major league childhood, and Fred has great stories.
Right.
One of them is that his mother cooked for all the visiting players. Right. The one player she would not let in the house was the guy she considered too crude and vulgar. That was Babe Ruth.
Right.
So, yeah, I love Fred Wiseman. He knows a lot about jazz and a lot about baseball, and I miss him here at Chautauqua. He hasn't been here for a couple of years.
I do too. I do too. You've been at Chautauqua for more than 20 years. In that time, you've seen a lot of changes at Chautauqua. The paper's changed, some other things have changed. What are some of the trends or some of the changes that you've noticed over the years, things that have been different?
Well, we talked about one of the places I miss that's not there anymore is Sadie J's Cafe.
Right.
Which was a place where I could sip coffee and watch sports on TV and
meet everybody, right?
And meet everybody,
Yeah,
that's right.
Right.
So, wow, it reminds me of, the joke. How many Chautauquans does it take to change a light bulb? Change at Chautauqua? Are you crazy? We definitely resist change.
Right.
Well, back about 12 years ago, we tennis players were very resisting moving to the new tennis courts.
Right.
The institution made a correct decision because that new tennis facility, now 12 years old,
It's great.
is great facility.
Beautiful, yeah.
But I guess I would say over the years, for many people, Chautauqua has become less affordable.
Yeah, I think it has. In a lot of ways, I know that Chautauqua influences each of us. We bring some part of ourselves to the institution, but the institution also influences us. How do you feel that Chautauqua has influenced you as a person?
It's a great question. So here's the first thing that comes to mind. And I'm not sure I've got to figure out how to say this, and I hope it makes sense. I think when I came to Chautauqua, I was good at giving things to my friends. I think Chautauqua has helped me learn to accept gifts from people graciously. Because I've met so many people, have been so generous to me, and I think my first response was to feel guilty about that. But then I came to understand there's great joy in their giving. So I think that's really an important thing that I learned in Chautauqua. I think I also learned to value friends in a different way. And it has something to do, I'm not even sure I can explain it completely, with the community aspect of Chautauqua.
It is a community.
It's a deep sense of community, and a deep sense of I think what I've learned to do is honor the best parts of people at Chautauqua. I think in my other life, people often irritate me and annoy me. At Chautauqua, I celebrate the good stuff in people that I meet.
Right.
I think that's what happens.
It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. I still need to learn to do that, I'm
Well,
afraid.
we can always learn and grow.
I need to have much more patience, that's for sure. But you've been great. I've really enjoyed taking your classes. I've enjoyed baseball and short stories, and we've had a lot of fun, that's for
And
sure.
do people know that you went from taking my classes to being a special studies teacher?
No, not a lot of people do, but if anybody asks, I do tell them that I learned from you. Especially I learned the Socratic method, a way of teaching, rather than lecturing, asking questions. We both like to ask questions.
I have to tell you that my Brown University MAT, Masters of Arts of Teaching, which was a summer and then 2 more semesters, was probably the highlight of my educational career, and I really learned to teach there. It's a great program.
And Chautauqua has really taught me how to teach. This is my 13th consecutive year, and I love it. I love teaching, and I teach other places too, but I love teaching here more than any place else. And it has to do with the students. You know, if you have the right kind of people, you become a better teacher.
And I would say, I agree with you, Ira, completely. In that short story discussion at Chautauqua, which I do sometimes for a whole week, but I now do every Saturday morning, which started, I think, in the year 2000 or 2001 as an experiment to have a Saturday morning class. Right. I think the first class had 3 people. Now it runs 20 to 25 people, and some of us have been together a long time.
Right.
And there's really deep friendships out of that class. But I was going to say, so the idea in that class is that we get an enriched reading of the story through interacting with the text and interacting with other readers. And at Chautauqua, people get it. Not only the civil discourse part, but the honoring the text and honoring other people.
I agree.
Which doesn't happen that much in other places, or it's harder to have happen.
Yeah, no, it does happen here, I agree. We only have a couple minutes left, but I have a kind of a tough question for you. You know that we're looking for a new president of the Chautauqua Institution, and I don't know how easy or how difficult it's going to be to replace Tom Becker. I think he's been a great president, mostly.
Yeah.
But what characteristics would you like to see in a new leader for Chautauqua? What is that? What should that person...
Well, let me preface it with this.
Okay.
I haven't given it any thought. Because in my other life,
Right.
I'm embroiled in all kinds of political, administrative stuff.
At the community college.
In my community college.
Right.
Here, I come to play and learn, and I sort of say, let the administration do their job. I'm not really
Forget about
that
politics.
interested.
No politics.
But I think the way I would answer it is, I think the new president needs to have an understanding and a respect for the incredible history that is Chautauqua and the beautiful sense of community that is Chautauqua, and understand that it's not a corporate entity. I mean, I understand that
Legally,
it's a business,
right.
and maybe somehow it has to be run like a business, but it's, to me, something way more beautiful and sacred than that. So I would hope the president who comes in appreciates that.
I agree with you. We always talk in terms of sacred space, that Chautauqua is not just the Hall of Philosophy or the AMP, but the entire space on the grounds.
And I think part of the reasons it's sacred space is because so much of it is public space, right? People don't have their own private yards too much, so
That's right.
yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
Some places you can only have free speech at a certain location. At Chautauqua, you have free speech every place, and you use it. I mean, people do.
Yeah, it is it's one of the rare places where people are really talking to each other with a kind of respect and honoring one another. I think that's true.
They do. Well, Mark, this has been great. I want to thank you very much
Well,
for being our guest on Chautauqua People. This has been a really good interview.
I've had a good time. Thank you, Ira.
Thank you. My pleasure. And thank you very much for watching Chautauqua People. And I hope you'll keep watching us, whether you watch us on Access Channel here in Chautauqua County or you watch us on YouTube. But thank you very much for watching Chautauqua People, and hope you have a great season and you keep coming to the Chautauqua Institution. Goodbye.